It is 7:30. I'd like to call
6:30.
6:30. Way ahead of myself.
Daylight saving time.
6:30, I'd like to call this meeting of council to order and acknowledge that the city of Winkler is located on Treaty 1 land, the home of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that have been made on these territories, but acknowledge that there have been harms and mistakes in the past. But we dedicate ourselves to a future based on respect of all peoples, including Indigenous communities, in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration, moving forward to a harmonious, prosperous future together. Be it resolved that the agenda for the regular council meeting of September 10th, 2024 be adopted. Mover?
Andrew?
Second.
Marvin.
Any additions or changes? All in favor? Carried. Be it resolved that the minutes of the regular council meeting of August 27th, 2024 be adopted. Mover?
Peter?
Peter got it. Don Fair got the second. Anything in those minutes that you have questions on?
Nope.
All in favor? Carried. We have a couple of pieces of correspondence there. We have a Board of Revision letter basically telling us when it is, Jody, assuming that we have some that will be needed.
Correct. They'll still be working on some of the appeals. I don't think we've had much for appeals so far yet, so.
But either way, keep Thursday, November 21st at 7 p.m. available until told differently. We also have a CCBF allocation letter from the provincial government. Maybe Jody, if you could help us out with that.
Yep, this is just the announcement of what we can expect for payments in the coming 5-year period. This is what was formerly known as the gas tax, so that's the Canada Community Building Fund. And so you can see the changes per year there, and David's also provided a little bit of a spreadsheet showing some of the historical numbers that we received. Yeah, you'll note in the spreadsheet there was a couple of years that
I
look,
don't see that.
it's in the background, I think it's called background.
Oh,
Wendy found a new feature.
there you go. Yep.
Catalyst, yeah. And
And it's surprisingly easy to sneak stuff past us on council when you hide it in plain sight like that.
in that spreadsheet anyway, you'll see some of the historical numbers, and you'll see a couple of years that are much higher. Those were the years kind of during COVID where they doubled the gas tax on a temporary basis.
Would be very, very nice if they made that more permanent.
Indeed it would.
There was a speculation that there'd be more conditions on it earlier on. I don't know if I see much of that has happened.
Nothing further
Right,
than this letter for now anyway.
Right,
If
yeah.
there's other changes coming, we're not yet aware of that.
Either way, it's nice to see
yeah,
the number increasing.
Yes,
It would be nice if it recognized the desperate need that's out there as well, and the inequality of how many services we provide compared to the amount of revenue that we get for it. But I will say it's extremely nice to see that at least it's indexed, that there is a cost increase consistently coming so that we're not falling further behind.
yeah. And you'll note in the letter that they have let us know that the department will be in touch with us at some point in the near future, I guess, about the formal agreement.
mhm.
So at this point in time, no action needed. It is simply correspondence.
That's right.
Thank you. Any questions for council? We'll move then to finance. Be it resolved that accounts payable in the amount of $1,208,719.13 as approved by the finance committee be approved for payment. Mover.
Andrew?
Second.
Don Friesen.
As always, our check register is attached and you've had a chance to go through it. Andrew, you had a question on one item that's been answered already.
2 items, yeah.
2 items.
was
Perfect.
asking about the Apple one as well, and you said that was a miss. Or what was it?
Somebody
A bit
tried
of a
to,
scam?
Yeah, it was fraud.
and we were able to reverse it, and all
That's
was
right.
good.
Yeah.
Excellent. Further thoughts or questions? All in favor? Carried. We'll quickly zoom down then to planning. Be it resolved that the minutes for the planning committee meeting of August 13, 2024 be adopted. Mover?
Don Friesen?
Second.
Don Fair?
Anything there that we need to be paying particular attention to? My shared notes there, I put a comment, I'm not sure if you guys saw that.
Mhm.
Like the boundary now with the dash lines extends past our current boundary, which is, it's typically always been a mile, but Arma Stanley had some concerns there. Had that been resolved?
We have had a conversation with the managers and heads of council. I think they expressed their concern to us, and to the best of my knowledge, that was going to lead to another conversation.
Yep.
But at this point in time, has not been fully resolved. We
So-
asked MSTW not to approve the
Mhm.
plan
Okay.
until we've had a chance to fully discuss it.
Yep.
They have these same concerns with the city of Morton and their fringe area.
That's right.
So the goal here would be to have those conversations in a way that allows them to feel comfortable with it.
Okay.
As already mentioned, Andrew, this has typically been a mile. They
Right.
have some concerns this time with some of the wording, and we wanted to develop some clarity around that.
That was my understanding too, just the minutes say we are supporting a 1 mile radius. Doesn't say
That
anything
was
about us
the-
talking
That
to
was
Stanley.
prior to, those
Okay.
minutes were prior to the concern that
But
was
we still
expressed.
want to keep that 1 mile.
Correct.
I understand, I'm just, we
And that's
want,
normal,
the-
I think, right across Manitoba.
Right, this
is-
Like, it's not that we're asking for something that's.
I know, but
No.
we still need to collaborate on this because it's the collaborative planning area.
I know,
Agreed.
no, I know, yeah.
And it's strictly to my understanding, Jody, and please correct me if I heard incorrectly. My understanding is the concern is mostly around wording. If in fact, and I think the concern specifically in that area would be anything developed in that area would need to be to city standards. That was the concern specifically that they had towards it.
Right,
So how exactly we work that out will be a conversation between Morton, Winkler, and Stanley, and then we'll come forward with something that we can bring here to council for support and that they can bring back to
Yep.
their council.
Mhm.
Good question, though. Anything further? All in favor? Carried. That moves us to community services, and be it resolved that the Discover Nature Sanctuary minutes for the April 23rd, 2024 meeting be received for information. Mover?
Marvin?
Second.
Michael?
Comments?
It's nice to see the active work on this
Absolutely.
committee.
And that area is already starting to turn spectacularly bright and
Mhm.
beautiful. So it's going to be another amazing fall there as well, and the work continues by the group.
Wonder if we can determine how many people actually go visit there?
I don't know that it would be, we could ask the group, but I don't know that they have any method at all of keeping.
It'd be kind of interesting to see,
Be good.
you know, to know how many people visit that site in a year. I don't know how you could do that, but
It's an excellent question.
I was there the other day and there's lots of mosquitoes that visit there.
Oh my, yes.
they wouldn't count, would they?
Well, you did say people specifically.
Yeah, I did say people.
You could put up a camera at the one end where the parking lot is, and you could,
Yeah, but the people access it from the other end as well.
yeah.
I would say, I've been there a number of times this summer, and I can't remember a time I was there without some other people also being there, so it's well used.
It's
Sure.
interesting, and it would be interesting to know, Jody, maybe if we could reach out to see if they have any idea at all in terms of numbers of people and what that is and isn't.
We'll find out.
Be good information to have.
Yeah.
Not seeing further, all in favor? Carried. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council recess for the purpose of holding public hearings. Mover?
Marvin?
Peter got you, Marvin got the second, all in favor? Carried. Jody, if you would walk us through the rules and how we're gonna do things, then we can get started.
We'll do that. So this is actually a continuation of the public hearing that was started at our last meeting 2 weeks ago. That meeting, or that public hearing was adjourned until today, so it's simply seen as a continuation. And as usual, if there's anyone here that wishes to speak to the matter, we ask that they step up to the mic, state your name and address, and then you can speak to the matter addressing the chair, who is the mayor. Just as a reminder, this public hearing is in regards to a proposed rezoning of 264 Main Street South here in Winkler, and it's proposed to go from R1 residential lower density to R2 residential medium density. And since our last meeting, we received 2 additional written objections, which were included in your package. One was from Verna Martins, 271 6th Street South, and the second was from Kim Giesbrecht at 277 6th Street South. In addition to the other objections and the report to council that you received last time, we've also added a grid that shows some of the objections and some of the responses that have been made in regards to those. So that should be part of your package there.
Thank you. As noted, there are 2 additional letters attached. You've had the opportunity to read them, council. We do have both proponents and some of the objectors here in chambers this evening. Not sure if anybody wishes to speak further to what's already been said, either proponent or objector. Okay. Council, thoughts on what you see here? Any questions that you have?
Well, I guess, if I may, on that grid, the final point, it mentioned a meeting that was to take place had not at this time. I'm wondering if that has taken place or if it has, if there's any outcome of that.
I'll ask again, please,
Yeah.
to come to the microphone.
Yes, there was a version of that meeting that happened. David and I spent some time in his backyard just chatting about different details, and Randy was not a part of that, but for whatever reason that part didn't happen. But we did discuss the opportunity for us to offer a guaranteed price for his property in the future should this go through, should he decide that his worst fears would be realized, that there would certainly be an opportunity for us to ensure that he would get the proper value for his home. So, yeah.
Thank you. Not seeing a rush to the microphones. Does council have further questions or thoughts that they would like to ask?
I guess my question would be to some of the objectors, are you still objecting, or are we in favor?
I would ask again, if you have any comments. So far verbally, we've heard a number of people saying yes, they still object. If you'd like to speak further to that, I would ask you to come to the microphone, please.
I did share my presentation last time. I'm Randy Penner.
Thank you.
259 6th Street South in Winkler. So, as stated 2 weeks ago, I did share my concerns. I'm curious, based on evaluations you've made, if there's any additional information I could share or provide insight into my opinion or position. I'd be willing to do that.
I guess from the comment on that grid, I'm thinking that I see that a meeting was to be held that would
Yeah,
include you as well, so I was just wondering whether that had happened. That was my question.
No, that did not happen. David and Sam and I did speak briefly after the council meeting 2 weeks ago, but I didn't have the opportunity to meet with Sam individually.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is David Clausen, 260 Main Street South, Winkler, Manitoba. Anything else I'm supposed to say? My concerns are still the same. I can't say those things have changed, so that's all I can really say. I know Sam and I have spoken, and it's going to depend on your judgment. That's basically, what I resign myself to. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Before you go, David, one of the concerns that you expressed was that you felt your property would depreciate in value. With that kind of an offer from Sam, does that alleviate that somewhat?
Somewhat. I don't know how long we'll live there. So, one of the things I would say, if it goes ahead, I wouldn't mind if there were some nice big juniper trees planted. I don't know if you've seen the ones by, it's on Peters and the corner of Peters and Main on the west side. And the backyard to that person, he's got some nice towering junipers there. I think that would be nice to plant those, even if I'm not there.
Right.
Doesn't really matter, just for the sake of privacy of that yard. But I know that they won't grow up to be up there when I'm there. That'll take a while. But it'd be nice,
Okay.
because it'll give privacy to that person, whoever comes in after us.
True.
I'll be sad to go, but that's how it goes. Thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
I took a look at the letters, and I do see the concerns. I think the concerns are real to each one who wrote a letter, otherwise it would not have been written. Concerns like light pollution, loss of privacy, health concerns, no space for children to play. These are real concerns by real neighbors. These aren't pieces on a game board. These are real items, and it's not an easy thing to be up here and vote one way for one person and the other way for another person. So but I do recognize these are very real issues for you people.
I'm not seeing further questions or comments.
I'm looking at some of the letters, I like some of the ideas, some is like I struggle with this one because to me it's just, I don't know, I know we need housing, we need rentals, we need it, and infill is good, it's cost effective for the rest of the taxpayers, we need people, we need places to live, and someone made a comment in one of the letters, but if we could redesign and make a one level or a bi-level style, it's not quite so high where parking's maybe towards the center of it in some sort of way, if that, and I know it's economies of scale, you gotta, it's all, you wanna maximize units, which I totally understand that too, but I sometimes wonder, how do you fix when there's issues like this, and especially, parking in the back? Yes, it's gonna be, people on night shift, stuff like that, they'll be coming and going at all hours of the night, depending where bedrooms are. So I sometimes wish we could somehow rethink that, where we could lower it and get that parking into into the center, and then that could alleviate some of the problems of that parking in the backyards, technically. But,
Good point, so maybe give the proponent an opportunity to speak to it if, in broad terms, if in fact you're able to, Sam?
I know I'm putting you on the spot, Sam, I'm sorry, and I know you don't have a,
That's fine, she said I wasn't gonna say anything tonight, but I guess I'm going to.
Yeah.
I think that, like, as developers, when we look at different opportunities that come up like this for growing housing in the community, what we do is we specifically come to your rule book, that some of you may have been involved with writing and some of you were not, but you do have a set of rules that you're governed by, right? And so you write those out, and we as developers, we go out and we buy this land in good faith, that if we follow all those rules, and that if we do meet with neighbors and try to do the very best that we can to accommodate those things, knowing that there will be change, and we know that we cannot address all of those things. We just never will be able to, because they conflict. Like the rule book and what neighbors might feel about those developments, there's always gonna be some angst there. There just is. And so where I'm at on this is that we followed the rule book. You know, as you know from our application, we haven't painted outside of the lines. So in our opinion, we stuck our neck out to buy a piece of land and to develop this within the rules. Now, when you ask if there's another development option available, there's lots of different ways developments can be put together, of course, and we've seen them. There's lots of different types. But each one of those has a different economic implication. So this particular property, and at the cost that it takes and at the size of the land that is there are certain economics. Now, that's not reason enough to say yes, right? And not reason enough to say no, but at the same time, it is a factor that we have to work with as developers. If we're gonna provide housing that's reasonably affordable for the tenants that are living there, that density has to be a certain level. And in this case, it's R2, it's medium, it's not high, it's medium. And like I say, I believe that we're painting inside of the lines, and that's why we bring it, right? Because we do believe that we're painting within the lines, and that we have a good viable project that could really work well for the community, notwithstanding the effects that it'll have on others. So.
Okay, thank you. Additional comments of any of the councilors?
I think looking through the concerns there, yeah, I mean, they're all very, very viable concerns. They're real. So it makes it tough. As I looked through it earlier today, I thought of other projects, like we had one on 7th Street where there was parking concerns from the neighbors. They opted to go with in-ground parking, I believe, in that case. Of course, there's added cost, which affects the economics of it. You know, the fencing as well. I look at the neighbors to Iceberg there who, because you don't want headlights shining in at all hours of the evening and night, the requirement was to build a solid fence, not wood slats. You know, so as I kind of mulled it around, I wondered if some of those things were viable options. And then the flip side of that going through my head this afternoon was, you know, we can never really fully control what goes on outside our property. You know, the lot size, it lends itself to good infill development. And the project falls within our infill guidelines. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that we have a respected developer attempting to tackle this project. And then I kind of go back and I wonder if the neighbors who have been there are sacrificing too much in accommodating such a drastic change. So it's kind of nutshell of nutshell of my thoughts on that.
Appreciate the comments, thank you. I'll ask one more time if anybody has additional questions that they need to ask before they can make a decision.
I think sometimes it makes sense. Some places on corners lend itself better. When it's right in the middle of something, it looks like it's not gonna lend itself, even though you have everything in place. It's just, sometimes it just looks better than other times. I don't know. I know it's hard to get one brush to paint everything the same. It's difficult to do.
Well, that's just it, because we make these guidelines, but
Mhm.
then.
It's
I-
difficult to build one rule for
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
situation, because we would ultimately have to build a different rule for every single situation. That's the really tough part here.
It's a tough one.
I would ask the neighbors, just to feed a little bit off of Councillor Granier's comments, if in fact we had a solid fence in the backyard to mitigate some of those late night traffic potentially, assuming and in all likelihood would be, and if we feed off of the idea of trees around that interior perimeter, does that mitigate your concerns at all? I'm seeing a lot of people saying it would not. I'm also not seeing further comments from council.
You have any comments?
No additional questions? The key piece?
Yep.
Yeah, please, absolutely.
I'm Kim Giesbrecht. Pete and I live at 277 6th Street South. Most of what I've been concerned about I expressed in that letter to you. I wasn't quite comfortable with saying all of it publicly, but for health reasons and other personal reasons, it would be very distressing for me. And even just thinking of all those vehicles in my backyard corner, even just trying to survive the 7 months of building already is just about putting me over the top. So a fence would help, obviously, if there wasn't light coming through all the cracks, but how much barrier would that really do to noise, and how tall would the lights be in that parking lot, and would the cars be playing music, and would they, I have no idea. Just the entire thing is extremely stressful.
Okay, thank you for those comments.
My name is Verna Martins, and I live at 271 6th Street South in Winkler. And this property would be my very backdoor neighbor. And I already have a fence there, and I still see lights coming, when people come home from work or late at night or anything like that. Lots of traffic would not be something that I want. I like to sleep with my windows open. And not so many weeks ago, I hear this blood-curdling scream coming down, somewhere down Main Street. And I'm thinking, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm hearing this. Do I call the police? So if we have 12 more families crammed into this space behind my back property, as a single person, I have a fence, a concrete fence, wouldn't take care of the noise. And I strongly oppose this, and I would welcome a redesign for something that's like the same level of the rest of the houses. Why not 4 families or 3 families instead of 12? I know we need housing in this town, city, but it's a great cost to the people in my neighborhood. I've lived there for 25 years, and I love my street. I love my neighbors, and this is a real struggle for me. So please take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenna. I appreciate your comments. It is a very serious consideration. Any time we have to review something that will change a neighborhood to any degree. This is a somewhat significant degree, as has been mentioned by Sam. This is mostly within our rules. It would require a variation or two, probably would be administrative variations, but there would be a slight change needed to it. And we certainly do need additional housing in Winkler. But it does change, and we've had people passionately express what those changes would mean to them, how they would feel about some of those changes. I get the sense that to a large degree, Glenbrook has had conversations with most of the community. My understanding, at least from what I've seen here and otherwise noted, those have been respectful conversations, but they haven't been enough to remove objections. Those are hard things to have to try to figure out, because in the end, we do have to make a decision here. And I would ask again that council have an opportunity to express every thought that they need while the hearing is open that might require a response. Once the hearing is closed, we have opportunity to discuss amongst ourselves, but we no longer have an opportunity to talk to the public. So if you have further thoughts, if you have additional comments, now would be the time to make them if you anticipate or are looking for a response.
I mean, when we say it's within our rules right now, I mean, this is a request to change the zoning though. Like the current zoning, it would not fall within the
That's correct.
rules.
That's correct. If the piece was rezoned.
Then it would fall within
Then
the
it
rules.
falls in the rules, but right now it's not rezoned.
I've got a question for Sam. I know you don't want to speak today, but so you're at a 3-story right now? So if you make it a 2-story, I know you'd be losing, what, four suites? Okay, so like the people that are objecting, if it would be a 2-story instead of a 3-story, would that make any difference?
I would ask again, if you're responding, to please come to the microphone.
A 2-story would depend largely on where the parking is. If there's still gonna be 8+ vehicles in the back and lights and concrete, which resound sound, it doesn't buffle sound, it wouldn't make a huge difference.
Okay, so I'm just trying to see where everyone's at, like if there's any kind of seeing where we could meet in the middle. So if like in a lot of, we were discussing at supper today, there's a lot of even new developments where you have a house and all of a sudden a 2-story pops up. And it's like, oh boy, now we won't have any privacy at all because, and it's happened to us too in the past, where all of a sudden we get a neighbor and there's a 2-story building that they're putting up and it's like, oh boy, now we don't have no privacy because you can look into my backyard.
Yeah.
So that happens all over town, whether you're in an older development or a newer development, you always have that kind of thing.
But that is still only one family.
That's one family, however.
That's very different.
Yeah, but there could be a lot of kids as well. But, so, you know, just to try and see if there is some kind of middle ground here, let's say if it would be a 2-story with a parking up front, if that would mitigate it?
That would be better, yeah, if the parking is in front and we don't have the cars in the back,
Right.
that would make a big difference, I think. Yeah.
So,
For me, I don't know what you feel.
I think when we're here trying to design, I love where you're going because it looks at what the neighborhood would feel to be
Right.
different.
because that's basically what we want to see, is where we can meet in the middle. And I don't know where Sam would be on that. I'm sure he has his, your plan and you'd like to kind of stick with that. But I don't know if it would be a possibility to find some middle ground here, or,
I would suggest as well that any change would also, again, need to fit with our rules and what does parking in the front look like in our rules. Those would be things that would have to be considered, certainly.
right, exactly.
But it is, which is why I think it would be difficult for our developers specifically to speak to this project at that point. But we are hearing something from the neighbors here.
Right.
That is an important consideration.
Yeah. So if we could meet, you know, somehow meet some middle ground here would be great, but, yeah.
And however they put the parking, if parking would be, say, in the center, if they had the buildings facing one another or the apartments, if the light poles or whatever would not be tall enough that they would be shining over into our backyards, that's also a concern. That's why we were talking about parking in the front. I mean, 4 vehicles could fit across the front, but obviously not 6 or 8 or 12. So that was part of the thinking. And I also mentioned in my letter precedent. So what's the precedent going to then be? There's another rental house directly behind us. If that one got bought up, we'd have another 3-story and we'd be basically kicked out of our own home that we've been for 23 years and hope to stay for longer. So I'm sure there are other people that would feel the same way. If someone put a 3-story right behind your backyard, you would probably have some feelings. When I look at where my kids live, some of our kids live on Gemstone, and the streets are wide, the buildings are set way further back. It's a whole different feel. It doesn't feel like a tall building because you're not in a narrow little old street. And yeah, so out there it feels like things are spaced, taller buildings are with taller buildings, and you're not right behind somebody's backyard with a low house. They're all kind of similar with big spaces. And I just think the design of the entire neighborhood matters, not just sticking one up here and everybody else is here. Oh, now we'll do another one, now we'll do another one, now we'll do another one, because we've now set a precedent. So that was just some of my thoughts.
Thank you for your comments. This is weighty.
It is.
I think we've heard a fair amount, and I think as we take a look at some of this, one key point was made by Councillor Fraze and Councillor Friesen. This is within the rules if it's already rezoned. We're thinking today of rezoning it, and we do rezone at various times and have when it makes sense to do so. I think what the community is asking of us here, does it make sense to rezone this one for this project? That's what I'm hearing the community asking. We've had some comments in terms of suggestions that you have here. And Jody, you may need to help us in terms of what the hearing and how it's open. We have a hearing specifically for this. Can that hearing, can it be rezoned with stipulations and in terms of maximums and what that looks like, and what conditions could council add should they so desire?
I don't believe that we can put conditions on a rezoning. Steph, do you know otherwise? You can?
You'd almost have to go back to the drawing board, right?
Well, we'll give Stephanie an
I think
opportunity
so.
to help us.
So third reading can be given, subject to conditions. So you do have that option. And in fact, our recommendation is that the engineered grading and servicing plan be approved by the city as a condition of rezoning.
Okay. Thank you. Does that help at all?
Yeah, I don't think it helps, because to me, it's being rezoned for a specific project.
You could put conditions per se on it. What I'm hearing is that you can put conditions on, you can put conditions of a solid fence, you can put conditions of trees, you
Yeah,
can
but
put conditions
yeah.
of number of units.
Yeah, but I don't think there's enough. I don't think we here can make that decision tonight on how many units properly fit in there or stuff like that. And here's an example of when we set our rule book in place, you know, we talk about units per acre and all this stuff, which all looks great, and then when it comes to this, it's like, oh, gee, Dinah, this is what can happen. You know, so it's to me, difficult to say, yes, we're gonna approve this, but you know, you can only build 16 units. Because does that even make sense? Does it make sense for the developer? You know, like, you know, and now it's rezoned, but there's no, like, to me, it's, yeah.
This one, to me, actually is starting to become a little bit easier in the fact that we can, because communities do change and will change, we can help it change either transitionally or harshly. If our feeling is that this one is too big and it's too harsh, then the answer is no, and we start over. Or we listen to our community, and our community says, if some of these conditions are met, it's more appealing to us, and it gives our developer an opportunity to consider whether or not that makes sense without having to go back fully to the drawing board and fully to the application process and right back to square one. That would become the challenge, and obviously, if in fact we do, if we feel we can put some conditions on it that makes it make sense and that helps our community say, don't love it, but can live with it, we have a way forward. Because again, we have rules created, but the rules are created for what it is today. And what it is today, this doesn't work unless we rezone it. And that opportunity to rezone it is also our opportunity to speak to it, and our opportunity specifically to add conditions to it to be there. Or we can approve as is, or we can deny. I'm feeling that based on the trepidation and nervousness that each one of you is showing, your feeling right now would be to deny, is the sense I'm getting.
But my comment is, if we rezone it, right now, he's asking for a variance of 1 unit, correct?
Correct.
So he could then build a 11, we could knock out 1 unit on the corner, and under the rules, he could do that in that property.
Unless we only rezone it with the condition that it have less.
But then we need to become the architects here tonight and come up with absolutely all the conditions.
It is a big jump from R1 to R2, 7 to 20.
And that's why we need to relook at our rules of infill, and that's where I'd like to first, I would like to relook at those rules before we, because what happens if we rezone this as R2 under our current rules, which are in
And
place?
what I'm feeling right now is there's not a comfort to do that. And that's what I'm suggesting. Going back now to Don's points, are there ways that solves this in order to have our proponent able to move forward and our community saying,
Yep.
okay, there are some pieces on it that may make that more appealing. Is there any appetite to do that? And maybe, and I really apologize, Sam, it's inappropriate to ask you to make a business decision mid-game, but I'll ask you to come and say, if in fact there was a condition that it could only be 8 on that location, and it had to take the neighbors' remaining concerns into consideration, could that be a possibility, or does that not work?
That's unfair.
Agreed.
Unfair to
And
ask.
if you'd prefer not to answer, that's also fair.
So,
If I may, just to add one thing, I don't think there's anything preventing a second reading tonight and not a third reading. Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, but what would that, why, I'm saying, what's the advantage of that?
The only advantage would be you're not trying to re-architect something here. I agree with, you know, that, because you're, there's no way for you to sit here today and see what could be
Yeah.
changed. And there might be nothing that, you know, in terms of, and I think what you're alluding to for the developer, there may not be another option that is financially viable.
And the developer may himself withdraw at that time, or
So-
say no.
I think, all I'm saying is, I don't think we would have to do third reading today. I know that delays things significantly again for the developer, but Steph, anything further to add on that?
I just wanted to point out that under planning legislation, after the public hearing is closed, council is required, if there are insufficient objections, to make a decision within 60 days. That's legislated under the Planning Act. So in principle, you could buy more time, but no new information can be really brought to your attention or contemplated once the hearing is closed. So just consider that as well.
And until we revisit our infill rules, to go into second reading and stall the third reading, you know, I feel for the neighbors, now they're on pins and needles, because if they also miss the third reading meeting, and all of a sudden, you know, they don't show up, there's like, but I also know we're coming into fall and building season is short, I also realize that too, but.
And you're right, that ideally, I think in the Planning Act, they do like to see councils make decisions in a timely manner
Yeah,
once things hit the table.
And we should, yeah. I guess I have a bit of a problem with the fact that we really asked to do two things, to rezone and then to approve whatever is proposed to be put in there. That makes it difficult, and I think, for me,
Just, we only rezone, and after that, because the variations would be administrative, we don't have to approve what goes
Right.
in, as long as it's built within those rules at that point in time.
Yeah.
And if there are no variations, it's straightforward, or if the variations are small enough that they're administrative, they don't come back to our.
Yeah, I would add to that, the reason for all of the other information is so that you have a context to make
right,
a fair and transparent decision in a
Okay.
public setting. So that's the reason for all of the other information. Otherwise, you're right, you could just do a rezoning, and then they color, to use the developer's words, color within the lines, and they'd be fine.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
within the lines would be 11 units, knock out 1 unit, because that's what he's asking for variance.
Yeah, I mean, we would
One
say,
unit too many.
you know, when we allow for minor variances at an administrative level or the level of the designated officer, I don't think we would typically say that's coloring outside of the lines, because we allow the variances. And
Right.
we try to do that in good faith, with the context of the rest of the whole package. So, I wouldn't necessarily say that's coloring outside of the lines, but the reason all of that context is there is to be open and transparent. But you are right, the rezoning otherwise would allow almost all of this to carry on just the way it is.
Yeah, I guess further to me, to my comment or question then, it would be if it was denied, the proponent could come up at next meeting with a different design that would be fully compliant in that, and it could be passed because it's just a rezoning requirement. And what would, just
And I think that's where that administrative rezoning kind of muddies the water. We have the exact same hearing for the rezoning, because technically, that's the only thing we have on the plate today.
Right.
If, in fact, somebody came forward with an 11-unit project, we still have
you still have to rezone.
the rezone, and the
Okay.
rezoning would still have the neighbors with concerns, likely very similar
Yeah.
concerns.
Yeah.
So in that regard, that administrative rezoning really just
variance.
muddies the water for this conversation.
Right, yeah.
Because it's not part of our conversation.
I think in order to keep it simple, we deal with the question at hand and not try to re-architect everything.
let the pros figure that out. And then we, in the meantime, then we need to relook at our infill rules. That's at least my thoughts. We have to look at that.
And I would suggest we don't have to ask anyone to re-architect anything. That if we have a different number in mind, that we can give that number as the option. It's still up to them to re-architect it in any way it makes sense.
But I don't, like, to me, I don't like the idea of saying, yes, we're approving R2, and then let's say 9 units, that's good. Because I don't know what it's gonna look like, you know, and it could be, you know, like, to me, there's too many variables
Yeah.
to,
And I would come back similar to one of the proponents' comments about, yes, putting a unit in here and saying 15 dwelling units per acre makes sense. And dropping it there may not make sense here. Less may be better. And that probably should go back to our table for conversation. But ultimately, we've kicked this thing back and forth.
Yeah.
My suggestion would be that we look at some conditions that would allow us to move forward with it. If in fact council's not comfortable with that, then I think we have a pretty good idea where we are with this. Unless some of you are not expressing.
I don't
how
think
you
it's
feel.
fair for the developer or the neighbors at this point to put enough conditions in to know what this thing is gonna look like. Like, we can sit here all night trying to decide.
And it shouldn't be our decision what it looks
I
like
know,
anyway.
but we're gonna say how many units that are gonna go in there.
And to speak to that just a little bit, like, I do think we have to be careful, like, while we can put conditions on,
What we can,
what we can and can't, we have a zoning bylaw that allows a certain density of dwelling units per acre
so it's
if we
either-
rezone it to R2. If we were to put a condition that violates our own bylaw, I think we run ourselves into some trouble with that. So while Stephanie's right that we can put some conditions on, you know, engineered grading and servicing, if it was a fence, but that the developers already agreed to. So,
ultimately here, to have the developer and the residents negotiate to a settlement that makes sense that we can encourage to, not really part of our piece. This
not
is-
to reduce the number
this
of
piece,
dwelling
and that's
units,
it.
that's right, yeah.
If the developer would say to the neighbors, here's my new plan, this is what it's gonna look like. How do you feel? And they go, okay, we can live with this, you know, blah, blah, blah. That to me is much more appealing, and then rezone it and get everything done versus rezone it and
Okay.
that's my speaker's opinion.
I don't see further thoughts?
Conditions only go in the third reading?
Yes.
Correct.
If we have, I'll ask again, if you have a comment, please come to the microphone.
So what happens when we sit down and we come up with something that we like, everybody is in agreement, but it actually opposes a bunch of the rules in your own bylaws?
I think
That would be
that's
my
the,
question.
I think that's the matter that I was attempting to speak to, is that, you know, there's policy and guidelines, and then there's bylaw. The zoning bylaw, once we would rezone to R2, allows for
Just to follow
the
that.
density, which would get you at least to the 11 units without any variation. So that's why I'm saying, for us to put a condition that violates that bylaw wouldn't be, I think, a fair decision, based on the expectations of fairness within the Planning Act. So we have to put conditions on if there are, that don't violate our other bylaws.
I would say, though, Sam, bluntly to answer your question, if the proponent and the neighbors come up with something that they believe makes sense for their neighborhood,
Yeah.
I would fight tooth and nail for every single one of the variations that's needed to make that work, if it makes sense for the neighborhood and the proponent. That ultimately is where we want to end up. In every situation, when a community changes, We want to make sure that it's for the betterment of the entire community in whatever way that looks like.
What happens for us when we are looking at density and when we want to limit our height of building and we want to have parking at the back, what we're required to do is cut out 24 feet of frontage to create a driveway to go to the back.
Correct.
And when we put that building, when we push that building back and we put the parking at the front, we actually give ourselves more frontage, which allows us to potentially have still similar density, but have a lower building. Now, it doesn't answer the question about the density. Like for us, when we talk about density and what makes sense, we need to see that higher density in order for us to keep the rent down so that people can actually afford to live in this building. But if we can do that by affecting the height of the building and pushing it back and put the parking at the front, we may not get to 12 units if we want to stay at 2 levels instead of 3. Just to clarify, when we talk about a 3-story building or a 2-story building, that's been back and forth today, right? Like, let's just be very clear. This has 3 levels, but the bottom half of it's in the ground, right? So it does respond like a 2-story building currently, with a basement, right?
Right.
So if we went ground level and we went 2 levels and we pushed the building back, and we're allowed to use the whole frontage, you know, because we don't have the driveway coming through, we can find a density somewhere between the 8 and 12. But I would suggest that, I mean, I don't have a design in my head yet, but I'm gonna say that it's still gonna need to be at least 8, if not 10, in order, like 8 will not make sense financially, but 10 could potentially. So if we like the idea of putting that building further back, now they have a different view of the backyards than they had before. And I think the reason why your bylaws are written the way they are is to try to protect backyards. And that's why I think the bylaws were written in such a way to try to say, hey, the least invasive on back door neighbors is to put the parking there and not to put the building there. So if you're saying that if we switch that and if the neighbors are mostly happy with that, like if we can agree on that as a group, that that's the best solution for the development, am I for that? Yeah, I am, because I'm not here to make things difficult either.
Correct.
I'm just trying to figure out how can we make a great project for the town and make it possible for everybody to kind of,
Agreed.
as many as possible
And
agree.
I think obviously we have to live within our own rules where we can offer variations where we're able to.
Yeah,
Ultimately, we have very good staff who work hard to try to make projects work.
yeah,
If, in fact, this doesn't pass, I would encourage exactly that, to have a really good, robust conversation with the neighborhood to try to come up with something with our staff in terms of what options may or may not be there.
mhm,
Some things we can change by variation, some things we can't.
mhm,
Some things are just there and it is what it is and we have to live with it,
yeah,
whether it's through planning regulations or otherwise.
right,
But in this situation, if there's a way forward, assuming that my read on council is correct and that this isn't moving forward, in that point, I would very much encourage that together with the neighbors, a plan is worked on that makes sense, that can receive support, that can work within our rules, how they work. And there are some challenges, definitely, in terms of protecting backyards and those kinds of things. That's, again, the aesthetics of a community that's really important to us.
mhm.
How that works and what that is, as we've talked here, we're certainly not going to sit here and design it because the 7 of us sitting at this table aren't skilled in that area. At least not that I know
Well, maybe not you.
Well,
but-
some of you might be.
of. Maybe some more than I.
I will say though that, like I gotta, put kudos out to your planning team because they work really, really well to communicate with developers. And they communicate very, very well the rules and the regulations. And they work very, very hard to bring these recommendations forward to you guys.
Agreed. And they
And
provide great
they
reports.
do a really great job of that, and I appreciate what they do. So,
Thank you, Sam. That's important to note as well. Further thoughts or comments?
And my only other comment is with the precedent, it's difficult on both sides of that, because across the street, there's R2 as well already, right? So there's been some precedent set already, but I can see the other side of it, that big tall buildings with lots of parking all over the back sets a different precedent, so, precedent is always difficult.
And every decision you make will set one. Be it resolved that the public hearing for bylaw number 2324-24 be closed. Mover?
Don Fern?
Second?
Marvin?
All in favor? Carried. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2324-24 be given second reading. Mover?
Andrew?
Second.
Peter?
Okay, all in favor?
I thought the discussion was going to be, once we were on the resolution, this other part was questions.
We can still talk now, we just
Yes.
can't ask the public
Yes.
anything.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I would
You
like
have something to
By
say?
all means, please do.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I misunderstood that a little bit. I thank you for being a developer and for wanting to do what's good for us. And I appreciate your comment about working within the rules. And I appreciate the neighborhood people coming together and voicing their opinions, their feelings about how that will affect the neighborhood, because as you already said, Mr. Mayor, that is important. I think what's happening tonight is, and it's already been alluded to by a few other council members, is or what you call the rule book may have some deficiencies in it. I do think that when the bylaw was created, and I most likely was part of it because I've been on council for more than 3 years, we made the best decision we could based on the information we had at the time. And as new information comes forward, I think it behooves us, and I think we try to do that. We try to make decisions that improve the outcomes of what we're looking for, look at the options and so on. And so I'm very much in favor of coming to an agreeable plan. I think we've witnessed that over the years when developers have proposed something in an area that has caused some concerns in the neighborhood. If they can come up with some agreeable form of something that works for the developer, for the long term of the community, that is really good. Because I don't think we're really good at being architects and figuring this out. I think for that reason I will vote today in opposition due to the concerns of the neighborhood and so on, the fact that we can't decide tonight how it would best fit the community.
Further comments? All in favor? All opposed?
I would just like to say I would be prepared to move to third reading with conditions, so that's my vote.
Thank you. The opposed carries it. Therefore, be it resolved that council retain current zoning of R1, lower density at 264 Main Street South. Mover.
Marvin?
Peter moved, Marvin seconded. Additional comments or thoughts?
This is for third reading?
This is in place of third.
Second reading was defeated.
One second reading.
So then what are you saying?
Therefore, be it resolved that council retain current zoning of R1, lower density at 264 Main Street South.
Okay. Wouldn't that be a given though?
No, if the motion is defeated, it can't be said that council's made a decision. And so you need to make
You have to make a definitive
you have to
decision.
make a definitive decision.
Okay.
Seems strange, yes.
So what happens if you vote no to that?
You put yourself in a bit of a conundrum.
Then we're here till midnight.
No pressure.
Well, I would answer it this way. If that motion was defeated, we would end the meeting with only having had first reading. And there's a certain amount of time, as was mentioned earlier, that a decision could be made. But, because, like I said, essentially the defeated second reading means no decision has been made. So the choice would be to make this resolution to say we want to retain the zoning, or to leave first reading out there.
Now you're muddying the water.
Those are the options.
Okay.
Okay, but going
And you-
back to Steph's opinion, does that mean we have 60 days to do it? That's one question. The other one, would that help so that the developer wouldn't have to go back to reapply through all this then, and so could
Yeah,
could expedite things if
yes.
they should work?
If you,
Sorry,
if we make a
shouldn't have asked.
resolution to retain the
Sorry,
zoning as it
shouldn't have
is, then the proponent would not be able to apply for rezoning for the next year, I believe. So, the 60 days, if I'm right, is after second reading. Just heard earlier today, actually, that if you leave a first reading bylaw hanging for 2 years, it becomes expired. I don't suggest in any way that we should let that amount of time lapse. Ultimately, it's the job here of council to make decisions in a timely manner. Steph, do you want to add anything there?
Yeah, so under section 75 of the Planning Act, it says here, unless there are sufficient objections to the zoning bylaw at the hearing held under subsection 74, the board or council may A, proceed to give the bylaw second and third reading, or B, pass a resolution not to proceed with the bylaw. So those are your two options.
So rather than, that's an excellent point, rather than confirm this, we can proceed, we can vote to not to proceed. Does that leave options in the future to put an application in within a year?
Yeah, Sam would have to wait to reapply 1 year for R2
Either way.
zoning.
If we.
Even if
confirm this.
we agree not to proceed? Even if we vote not to proceed?
I'd have to spend a bit more time reviewing the legislation, but as of right now, like if you're not prepared to give both second and third reading, then you would need to pass a resolution not to continue with this bylaw.
So
As opposed to the motion we have on the floor?
the motion is the same essentially, though,
You're essentially passing a bylaw not to proceed.
or a resolution not to proceed,
Yeah, a resolution not to proceed.
which means by default that the
That
current
this-
rezoning stays the way it is. Or, sorry, the current zone.
But if we change our infill bylaws,
Guidelines, policy. Sorry, it's a
policies,
policy.
then the rules change, why could he not reapply then?
Because.
It's the planning act.
Bingo. Because the legalese of the planning act. We
So
brought
s-
it to this point, then we stopped it. Now there has to be a pause.
And that's just the legislation
Correct.
of the planning act.
That's outside of our jurisdiction. That's
Yeah.
province of Manitoba.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is the only way we can do this to not make the developer wait for a year is go to second, just go to second reading?
No,
Second
we-
reading's passed.
Second read's been defeated.
Correct.
Right.
Can't do that now.
But it will need time to look at our infill guidelines. Rules also are.
Correct.
That won't happen within the next week either.
Like, at this point, essentially, the rezoning has been defeated. What the planning act says is that you should pass a resolution,
Hence this one.
not to proceed, or the wording that you see there is an attempt to put the wording in a positive, because the municipal act requires that all resolutions be stated in the positive.
Giver?
Okay? All in favor?
So what are we in favor of?
the motion on the floor. Therefore, be it resolved that council retain current zoning of R1 lower density at 264 Main Street South. That's a motion on the floor that Peter and Marvin put on the floor.
That's to keep it as is, right?
That is correct.
Yeah.
Further thoughts? Are we ready?
So if we vote against it, then that
Then we're
was,
in purgatory.
yeah, well, that's right, you said midnight.
It would go against,
Yeah.
against the previous
Right,
vote.
yeah,
We would have two at odds
Yeah.
with
yeah,
each other,
yeah, that's right, yeah.
which means
Makes-
we would have had no decision and we are required to make a decision.
This is the official way to make
Yeah.
the decision based on
Mhm.
the,
The defeat of the
yes,
second reading.
yeah.
That's the second level of
Yeah,
ambiguity.
okay, yeah.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I also want to echo Marvin's comments that thank you very much for coming and sharing and expressing your opinions about your homes where you live. And it is very much appreciated that we come here and discuss this thing in public, right? So, and thank you, Sam, for your hard work on this, and hopefully something can come about this yet.
Echoing those same comments, it is only when you show up that you influence the decisions that are made here. Whether it's for you, what you'd like, or opposed to what you would like, it's only when you show up that you are able to influence how things happen. You saw today the difficulty that council had with this decision. When people come and people put themselves out there, it helps us to really see what's happening. If we're not a neighbor, if we're not in that area, if we're not the developer, for us to truly, truly get a feel for what's happening and what's being looked at, it's because you showed up and because you presented. It's also one of the reasons that we strongly encourage in every instance of something happening in the community, that the community themselves, whenever possible, come to their own resolution, because more times than not, two neighbors are able to figure it out better than we are if we try to step into it. So today, thank you very much for coming out.
Thank you very much. And in the last 2 weeks, I think I've driven past that site no less than half a dozen times, slowly, just to take a good look. And not just on that street, I went to the next street, past your people's houses, so. Yes, thank you to both sides. It's tough, yeah.
Be it resolved, public hearings be adjourned, regular council reconvene. Mover.
Andrew?
Don Friesen got it, Andrew got the second. All in favor? Carried. That takes us to questions from the media or public relevant to this meeting of council. Anybody here wish to say anything further? Not seeing any. Wendy, we've got nothing online. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council be adjourned. Mover.
Peter?
Michael got the move, Peter got the second,
Back
all in
you up.
favor?
Thanks.
Yep.
Carried.
Appreciate the support.
Okay.
That was a tough one.